Hello, my monstrosities. Hello once again. Today I bring to you a general discussion video. I asked you all over on the community tab, what is your favorite horror genre in DbD? And I gotta admit, you all never fail to surprise me. Sci-fi came out on top out of the options that were available. I can only put so many. And it's funny because that doesn't feel like community sentiment. This is one of those ones where it feels like maybe DbD does have a very strong vocal minority issue. There was a lot of complaining about how much sci fi we were getting after they finally did sci fi for themselves with Singularity. Now, mind you, we had Demo and Nemesis before, both being licenses. And we finally have Singularity after Wesker. And we have Zeno. But everybody seemed to be, oh, I'm so tired of sci fi. Even though it's not like it plays a major role in this video game. Like, who cares what type of genre gets into DbD? And quite frankly, I don't think the devs do either, but I'll explain a little bit more on that front. But going through this, there was genuine questions that I struggled with myself, such as King Trey bringing up a good point of is there even a true psychological baddie in DbD? And as you can see, I debated this myself, but it felt wrong not giving that title to Pyramid Head. Because where else do you throw? Like, do you go to Slasher? Do you go to what? Horror is a genre in which labels aren't always clearly defined, and that's okay, right? I think we can all appreciate what horror can be most of the time. I do find that maybe it's because I'm getting old and the population of gamers is younger than me, but it just feels like people don't appreciate the horror genre in the game that's based on horror anymore, for the most part. A lot of people haven't seen, well, Heckraiser. A lot of people have never played a single Resident Evil, and that's fine. Welcome everybody to the party. But it's interesting when I see so many comments that are like, why Nick Cage? He's never done. Well, Nick Cage is in horror, and I go, excuse you? Right? So it's a very interesting thing in which I now wonder what's your favorite type of horror overall? Personally, I like folk horror, psychological horror, and as I've come to realize, I do like sci-fi horror. I've always figured that that's my biggest one that I've disliked, and I've said this before, but I think it's just very easy to mess it up. I've seen some bad sci-fi horror, and I think it's very, very easy to just get it way too goofy, where you end up into the comedy horror with how bad it is. Like, for example, Piranhas and Piranhas 3D. Now, those are clearly comedy, but was that supposed to be sci-fi horror too? Then I've also seen things like, okay, don't get too mad at me, YouTube. Killer Sofa, which, if you ask me, was actually better than a lot of horror that I've seen. And in my early days of content creation, I watched Llamageddon. And even somebody from the folks at Llamageddon came to hang out for a little bit with the watch party over while I was streaming regularly. And that was pretty cool. And let me tell you, Llamageddon is hilarious. So if I had to ask for another license to come to DbD, I think it'd have to be Llamageddon. Which, still, I think you still have to call it sci-fi too. But let's go back a little bit before I get too far with that and think about the horror genres that we do have in DbD and if they fit really anything. Psychological and slasher did come in a tie for second, and then surprisingly, comedy out of the options provided here, and I do still welcome you to either add your favorite genre in the comments of this video, or go to my community tab and hang out with us, and give me some answers there. But looking at this, when I say I don't think the devs even care, I don't mean that in a negative sense, and I don't think they should, really. I don't think they need to be keeping track of what they fill out for the roster when it comes to horror, because I don't think their player base does, like, at all. And as well, actually, let's go back here. Boom. As we have with the true Neoteric, you could go watch his YouTube and his Twitch. Is it possible to not really have a favorite? I honestly enjoy each fairly equally. I responded here that basically, as long as they play nice in game, I'm down to like them myself. And well, I think we give the devs a lot of grief, and I shouldn't say we because I'm not nearly as bad as some people. But, you know, I am not happy with the current state of this guy on screen after playing him for so long. And, you know, for the rest of them, I think I'd only mind because I've played him so long. The rest of the cast I haven't played that often, and the only one that I think I'm remiss about is probably Freddy, because that was one of my favorite baddies for a very long time. And that's actually another draw factor that brought me to DbD when I played way back when, before I was playing regularly. I was like, wait, you mean to tell me I could be Freddy Krueger? Awesome. So, you know, not happy with the state of him, but those are just the ones that I care about. And that's fine. But if we go over to something like Psychological, where I had to give it because there's Pyramid Head, who else is there? Really? Like, I've struggled for a while to kind of label Heckraiser. And if you've seen them, I think it's not too fair or not too unfair to wonder what they are. Would you call the series psychological? Because if you've seen them, there is a general theme of naughty nature, and that's kind of like the whole perspective. But when it comes to what type of genre it is, do you go, the only thing that seems to be consistent amongst them is body horror? Or am I wrong in saying that? I feel like that's not too hot of a take. I feel that's pretty fair. Or if we go over to Ghostface, another person that I've liked for a while, people seem to only be aware of comedy horror now that Nick Cage and Chucky are in the game, but did we forget what Scream is like? Like, it's right there. And if you ask me, the ripoff of Ghostface that the devs came up with is pretty goofy too. But I will give the flowers that, you know, there's a lot of slasher. And that's kind of what this game is, wholesale. And hey, I just want to throw one last in there. If we want to talk about comedy horror, have you seen some of the Texas Chainsaw Massacres? Come on now. I like it. It's a little bit goofy, a little bit wacky, as they all get. Then they had their. Would that be Silver Age or Golden Age? I can't remember off the top of my head which age that would be. When everybody got a little bit more actiony and goofy and wacky, where things were just off the rails in the horror genre. But there does seem to be a lot of body horror within this game. We have twins. I'd even argue Blight with the face and, well, okay, maybe not that face. Hey, maybe that one too, actually. But, you know, jaw hanging off the top. A little bit of shake. Would Blight be sci-fi horror given what he was supposed to be? He is an alchemist, right? That was chasing after the entity and then finally got invited to the party. But as you also have Plague, who, as somebody that really doesn't like Vom, took me a while to get used to being able to see her on my screen. Now, mind you, I guess I could be worse. So you go, well, are you truly that perturbed, disturbed by it? And, you know, I don't think it's helped me build a resistance in real life, but I can get past Plague now. And then people will argue Clown too, just because he's heavier set and cuts off fingers. But what do you call Clown besides a slasher? And do they need much? We look at somebody like Pig, and you could argue certain Saw films are psychological. But I think we all can agree that it comes to a very torture indulging fantasy for a bit later in the series. Or maybe not even all that much later, right? And I threw out Doctor for psychological too. And I don't feel that's too far off. But I'd also give it to Nurse, given how many times people DC as soon as they hear us, right? But what on earth do you call Wraith? What do you go as far as saying that Wraith is slasher horror too? And Trapper is, let's be honest, supposed to be not that one. Supposed to be a rip off of Jason. Maybe not supposed to be, but you know, let's be honest with ourselves. It's pretty much Jason. So, not to say that they all need a clearly defined label within our fair game, but I think it's fine to just do what they do. We were so happy with Dredge finally having an OG monster within the game that, well, what does it matter? And as much as I like my supernatural horror as well, I do find that people don't know how to play it all the time. But another thing that drew me to, alright, you can't even click when they're disabled, but drew me to like Night after I was kind of bogged down about the state of Trickster in the game is, well, that's supernatural. And I guess, did we find the correct label for the Heckraiser series? Maybe, right? It just feels like when you have something that are so multifaceted as much as this series and and really all of the good franchises, not to say that not every franchise that gets in here isn't good itself, but you really know what you're going for with Child's Play and Chucky you're going for comedy horror slasher. Same with Scream. You know what you're going for there. But then there's some that hit a bit deeper, such as Heckraiser. And I know that's probably annoying some people, I apologize, but sometimes YouTube really doesn't like you saying too many things too often. So just playing it safe. But, you know, it gets really to a point that it's okay to not be clearly defined. We know Trickster as K-pop. I wouldn't necessarily call him slasher, right? Or am I wrong in that? I don't think every baddie that happens to just be a bad guy just gets thrown in the slasher. I'd say there's a bit more depth there. You go with maniacal, it's evil, and there I'd say thriller, right? A lot of people fall into thriller after a while when you go, huh, I guess that was a bit just more scary in the moment versus scary overall. So, coming out of this, going back to our question, besides DbD, what is your favorite horror genre overall? Like I've said, I'm a good for psychological, folk horror, sci fi, supernatural. I like most of it, and I don't think there's any particular after I've finally seen the light about sci fi and how I, I, I'm a RE fan, and Zeno was my most requested in my opinion that I wanted to come to the game. That I don't mind even sci-fi, even though there's a lot of bad sci-fi horror. There is a lot of bad, and maybe one day we make a video talking about some of those. I've seen some rough ones. Like, have you seen Lava Lantula? Oh man, Lava Lantula exists. And maybe that'll be fun in the comments too. If you just want to tell me some not too great horror movies that you've seen that maybe we should watch sometime. Or even a classic like Birds from Alfred Hitchcock, right? Or Birdemic, Sharktopus. There's a lot out there. There's a lot out there. So, you know, maybe you tell me what's the best and what's the worst horror out there, and we go through one of these days and we see about that. So, yeah, if you like the video, like it. Got a comment from me, comment. And until next time, peace out, my monstrosities.